late winter on the Connecticut. The river is flowing, but the banks are still frozen. The snowpack covers over 10,000 square miles.
Love it! What do you think? Go off the ice shelf, huh?
Yeah. Same way as the other one. Don't break it. That's why I have a zipper on mine.
University of Massachusetts biologists scuba dive to search out life forms that evolution has forgotten. As the weather gets warmer and the snow melts, a torrent of water pours into the Connecticut. The river crests its banks and floods into the lowlands. The spring flood has begun. The spring flood carries a deluge of water downstream into Long Island Sound and then into the Atlantic Ocean. An underwater migration path is marked by this river of fresh water in the salty sea. Certain species of fishes sense this migration path and follow it into the Connecticut. These fishes fight their way upstream, overcoming many obstacles. They are driven by the most fundamental of urges, the urge to reproduce. Some will die from the rigors of the journey before ever reaching a spawning site. Among the fish species struggling up the river, the sea lamprey, Petromyzon marinus, is really strange. It is a living fossil, little changed from lampreys that lived over 300 million years ago. Lampreys are vertebrates, just as we are vertebrates, but lampreys are very primitive vertebrates. Lampreys lack jaws. They are jawless fish. Lampreys are a living link back to a time when all vertebrates lacked jaws, a time before jaws evolved. Sea lampreys have probably survived because the adults evolved a unique way of feeding. Lampreys parasitize fish.
Adult sea lampreys are parasitic. By that, we mean that they attach onto a host fish using this structure right here, which is known as an oral hood. These oral cirri on the outside help the lamprey seal tightly to the fish when it attaches. Inside the oral hood, you can see the rows of teeth that are used to break into the skin of the fish. And here is the tip of the tongue, which bears specialized rasping teeth that are used to break into the body cavity of the fish. The prey fish bleeds into the mouth of the lamprey, and that's its food. Here is the eye of the lamprey. When it's preserved, the eye is cloudy, but as you can see in the shots of the living lampreys in the Connecticut River, these are very visual animals. They have large eyes and depend on eyesight. Here you can see the nose. This animal has just a single nostril, and it sucks water into that nostril. After the chemicals have been detected, it expels it, just like a turkey baster. Behind that is located the third eye of this fish. This is not an image-forming eye, but instead is used to help regulate biological rhythms, such as day-night activities and even migration.
Floodwaters in the Connecticut peak in April, and man-made obstacles such as dams can block the spring migration. Here a fish lift carries lampreys and other fishes over the Holyoke Dam, allowing upstream migration to continue. Lampreys migrating up the Connecticut are no longer feeding. They are swimming machines carrying sperm or eggs with the sole mission of sexual reproduction. By May, lampreys have reached the river's small tributaries. There, they seek out shallow gravel bars where they build their nests as depressions in the stream bottom. Male and female lampreys are easily distinguished. Only the male has a strong ridge along its back. A pair of lampreys, a male and a female, excavate the nest depression. To move sand and pebbles, lampreys vibrate their bodies, sending these smaller particles cascading into the current. Larger rocks are moved using the suction capability of the oral hood. Lampreys have a unique gill system that allows them to maintain a negative sucking pressure in the oral area and still take in water through their gills. Most fishes take in water through the mouth and out the gills. In lampreys, gills and mouth are separate. 7 rounded gill apertures on each side of the body pump water in, remove oxygen, add carbon dioxide, and pump the water out. When the nest is complete, a female releases tens of thousands of eggs that are fertilized by the male. The fertilized eggs settle into the spaces between the rocks, and the embryos rapidly develop. After spawning, the adults leave the nest, drift down the stream, and die. In early summer, dead and decomposing lampreys are found everywhere on the riverbed. Dead lampreys are food for fishes, such as this American eel. Unlike the primitive lamprey, eels have jaws and a pair of pectoral fins. Eels and lampreys are only superficially similar. In terms of evolution, they are very, very distant cousins. Dead lampreys also provide food for some of the river's invertebrates, such as this crayfish. Thus, lamprey migration is an important source of marine proteins and fats for Connecticut River food webs. The embryos develop into small, eel-like larvae that leave the nest. They drift downstream in search of soft sediments in which they construct burrows. To collect lamprey larvae for study, fishery scientists use a technique known as electrofishing. Electrofishing can shock the operator, thus rubber boots and rubber gloves must be worn for protection. 2 electrodes are submerged and an electrical current passes between them, producing an underwater electrical field. The electrical field stuns the larvae and they float to the surface where they can be captured with a net. Lamprey larvae are called ammocetes, and unlike adults, they are filter feeders. Ammocetes look very different from adult lampreys. In fact, when ammocetes were first studied, no one realized that they were a phase of the lamprey life cycle. An ammocete lacks the well-developed eyes of an adult, and its mouth is designed to suck in water. Ammocetes live in shallow burrows in the soft sediments of streams and rivers. The ammocete's head emerges from the burrow, water is sucked in through the mouth, filtered for aquatic microorganisms, and expelled through the gill apertures. For example, ammocetes filter out and feed upon diatoms, which are very common algal microorganisms in streams and rivers. Ammocetes live in tributaries for 5 or more years before beginning their metamorphosis to the adult stage. Individuals in a transitional state from ammocete to adult are called transformers. This phase may last for a few months as the transformer develops eyes, gill modifications, and an oral hood with rows of teeth. When these changes are complete, transformers leave the tributary sometime between late fall and early spring. River floods, especially the spring flood, carry them to the sea. In the sea, the newly metamorphosed lampreys attach to a host fish for feeding. They do not necessarily kill the host, but certainly leave it weakened. Lampreys grow very quickly from their rich diet of blood and body fluids and attain sexual maturity within 14 to 18 months. In the spring, the cycle will begin again with the migration of adults into the river. Lampreys are an underappreciated part of the river's ecology. The annual migration of adults brings nutrients from the sea to the river. Ammonite larvae can be the most abundant fishes in small tributaries and provide food for other Connecticut River fish. We still know very little about the underwater environment of the Connecticut River. Beneath its surface is an underwater world whose exploration is just beginning.